You don't have to touch them. You don't have to torture them. But and a lot of times, as you know, their mind becomes their own worst enemy because of the imagery of their own fears. You can touch on people's fears without touching them. And that's the idea here. We need to be better and more instructive in how we have people do that.
Well, let's take Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He confessed after 100-plus waterboardings. They finally threatened his family. They finally said, well, something bad's going to happen to your kids and wife if you don't. He confessed to bombing buildings that weren't built till 4 years after he was arrested. He almost confessed to sinking the Titanic or killing Kennedy. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Well, and I think this brings up an excellent problem for the prosecutions we're now going to face for the 9/11 terrorists, the detainees at Guantanamo Bay, which is similar to anybody who has something to do with 9/11 regarding the techniques you just mentioned. Anytime you torture someone, Alex, the fact is this: they're going to tell you whatever you want to know to make the pain stop. And that's been proven over and over again. So, again, it's one of those things where I think there were some other very advanced techniques. One of the 9/11 conspirators were broken by very complex techniques relating to the fact that he was a pedophile. So in this one instance, they used the idea that his personal conduct was directly in contrast and contradiction to his personal beliefs relating to Allah and his faith. So enough of hitting him on that, not hitting him literally, but hitting him with the idea of the disconnect between his personal conduct and his personal beliefs is what broke him eventually. And this is the idea. You need to get inside these people's head, these individuals' head, and break them without touching them. So when you look at the interrogation program, I personally turned down a seat in that program. I talk about that a little bit in my book, about being given a tour of one of the secret prisons and then saying, I've been asked, what do you think? It's like, look, I basically said, just to read ahead in the book here, I want nothing to do with this. And frankly, that's the problem. I think when you have a policy set up by an administration, Alex, the Army or the military is obligated to follow it. And that's one of those things where you have lawyers, hopefully lawyers who are smart enough to understand that you can't arbitrarily decide to start breaking U.S. laws. And I frankly read the memos done by the Bush White House lawyers as being illegal, approving illegal activities, which frankly, we as soldiers are obligated to try to resist illegal orders. And you were told that in your training. It is your obligation to not follow illegal orders. It becomes a very fine line between following orders which are given by lawful authority, which we're trained to do, or trying to find a way to not follow or disabuse yourself of illegal orders.
Well, I mean, you just talked about it being illegal, and clearly it is illegal on the face of it and immoral.
Yes.
But now we have Obama continuing snatch and grab. More black sites have been exposed all over Europe and Asia. We know this is intensifying, not subsiding. And so I guess they got away with it. So now it's secret policy in the CIA.
Speaking as an academic, every administration who comes in tends to take on the tools which the previous administration used and were successful in using. So frankly, I don't believe there's going to be any great difference between the Bush White House and the Obama administration on a number of these policy issues. And let's cite, for example, Alex, the kill capture program. I've said on Fox News a couple different times recently that the Obama administration's been their default position is killing people, and that's something I find totally idiotic as an intelligence officer. The idea is you need to capture people and find out what they know. So because they don't want to deal with the issues relating to what do we do with detainees, do we put them on trial in a civilian court, do we do military tribunals, because they don't want to deal with that, now the default position is killing people, which you've read about recently with the issue of al-Awlaki. Apparently, according to the news reports over the past 2 weeks, there is now essentially a death warrant been issued for him to be killed, if possible, by U.S. or Yemeni forces on site. So this is something clearly that I think is a bit. I think we should be defaulting. Our default position should be capturing these individuals, and if we really can't, then I think we need to look at it. But we should be capturing them. And frankly, the other problem with this is that they're in the extremist belief, Alex. Being a martyr is a great thing. I think we need to avoid giving them that opportunity to be a martyr. And this includes al-Awlaki, and this includes bin Laden, if he's still alive.
Well, I mean, Osama bin Laden, let's cut right to the chase. Trained in the 80s, worked with the CIA. We know the Muslim brigades have been used to destabilize countries the West doesn't like. They were used against the Soviets. They're being used against the Russians. Today, it's a convenient boogeyman out there. We know the underwear bomber was allowed on the plane, protected, given a visa by the U.S. An unnamed intelligence agency told the State Department this. This is on record. And then we get the internal Homeland Security documents. Most of Homeland Security now in Northcom is set up for the American people, returning veterans, gun owners, conservatives. Law enforcement gave us those documents last year. They were confirmed to be accurate, and the Pentagon was hopping mad, and so was Homeland Security that we got them. But when we really look at this, right, this is a system that's been set up for the American people. And, you know, you're in Ireland right now. You said Northern Ireland leaders condemn bombing. I've got the New York Times article. I had Agent Steak Knife on before they killed him a few years ago. You know, British Special Forces, Special Air Services assigned to this. And he said that the IRA was run by British intelligence as a pretext to radicalize things, as an excuse to be in Ireland, especially Northern Ireland. I mean, come on. We know the Russians have staged terror. We know our own government has Operation Northwoods. What can you say about government actually being behind some of the terrorism in history?
Well, Alex, I got to stick with what I know for it to be the fact. I mean, some of these references you've referenced, you've mentioned, I have not read, and I can't speak to things I don't know.
Do you know about Northwoods?
Well, I don't know much about that. I've not studied that. But what I will say is that there's clearly, as of late, a tendency to start looking at internal threats more than external. Now, I cut my teeth as a lieutenant doing counterterrorism stuff in Germany back in the mid-'80s. And it was very clear then, and I'm not sure what changed between then and now in many aspects, but I know back then we were very much concerned about the Soviets funding radical groups within Germany. As a matter of fact, my first counterterrorism operations were focused on the RAF, sports group Hoffman, and things like that, where it was very clearly a third party, a third organization, being the Soviet Union, was funding a lot of that activity, as noted by the fact that once the Cold War ended, a lot of these groups faded off into the distance and never came back. I think that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that there is some real, energy been given now to our government looking internally. And I think in some cases it is not warranted by the fact that you're going to have veterans coming back who have clear psychological problems. But the way to deal with that is by giving them the treatment they need, not treating them as adversaries. And I think that's one of the things that has been trending lately, is to look at people who have come back and have problems as an internal enemy.
But more than that, what are your Pentagon associates saying about the fact that, I mean, as you admit, more of this is being swung around internally? From my research, here's an example. It came out in the Baltimore Sun that Ron Paul and myself and others, and we ended up getting the secret Army document, which they confirmed was real, so there's good guys in the military sent it to us, that when I go out and have an In the Fed rally, they've got military Army intelligence watching me, and it says in the memo, don't let them know you're with the Army. They may be terrorists and may kill you. So they're teaching the Army that I'm like some vampire that's going to try to tear their throat out?
There's a number of legal problems with that. And one of the things I came up against during Able Danger, which was the issue of posse comitatus. And I think it's a very good law for a number of reasons. First off, as you just mentioned, it is illegal for the Army to be augmenting directly civil law enforcement operations. That is clearly illegal. So that's one of those things that I know people like Senator Arlen Specter were very much against the idea of allowing folks to be used for purposes of law enforcement, and there's good reasons for it. And this is something that harkens back to the 1960s, where it was equally a bad idea then to use military intelligence folks for civil law enforcement, and I think it's the same thing now if this is going on. Now, I don't know of anyone within my circle of associates and friends who have been involved in that. It's not to say I don't know if it's happening. I personally don't know. I've not been involved. I don't know of any one of my intelligence friends who have been involved, but I know that there's been contingency planning done to look at how the military could be brought in to support civil unrest, support the civil authorities during times of civil unrest. Now, that's something that I know has been kicked around a lot over the past 30 years, frankly. The idea of coming in time of crisis to actually
Rex 84. Well, let me ask you this. I mean, I literally, in the last 10 years, have had guys get out. They're obviously military in plain clothes, and even threaten me in parking lots. I have national news everywhere saying I'm calling for violence when I'm not. Does it sound to you, Colonel, like they're trying to set me up for something?
Well, it sounds like any other whisper campaign. I mean, Alex, as you know, I was victimized by a whisper campaign by the Pentagon as well when I first broke ranks. And I think there's something else that you need to look at here regarding the fact that when, you know, there's something called CIFA. Are you familiar with CIFA? The Counterintelligence Force? Yeah, that. Everything that I heard about that was, and I hate to use this as a term, but it was like Darth Vader's vanguard. By the fact that those people they had no interest in counterintelligence. They were essentially, as I understand it, Steve Cambone's dirty tricks folks. And they, in one case, they were surveilling a Secret Service